This time in full teacher mode.
Hello again. This is Miss Jameson. This is week 2. First of all, I would like to give you some pointers about how to be successful in your classes. Make sure you read your assignments. It sounds like a really simple thing, but I think it's the foundation of everything. If you have a hard time paying attention, get 2 or 3 of your friends, take turns reading out loud to each other. Maybe one of you is a really good reader. Listen to that person. 10th graders, I'm going to start with you. Contents of a Dead Man's Pocket. That's what you just finished reading. I'm going to go through the story very quickly, point out some things that I think are important, and then I'll move on to the 11th graders. It starts out with Tom. We know he's at a typewriter. He's thinking about his work. He's conflicted internally. Should he go with his wife to the movies on a date? It's a Thursday. It's vaguely important. Or should he stay home and do this project? This project that could get him a promotion. Not because of his boss, but because he knows that maybe down the line it could, but it's not something that has to be done, but he's the only one who can do it. So he has this choice. We know, the reader, when I say we, that his wife and him have a good relationship because when she goes to leave, he is tempted to go. They hug, he smells her perfume, they're acting playful. If you read this out loud, you probably laughed at some of the playful parts I'm talking about. If you didn't, make sure you go back, it's very cute. We can also tell they have a good relationship because she's not mad at him. She's like, yeah, I know you have to get stuff done, I'm gonna miss you, but you gotta do this thing. And then something very important happens. He had opened the window before she left because it was hot in the apartment. As he's shutting the door, the wind from the hallway pushes an important piece of paper out the window. You should know why this piece of paper is important, why if a stranger found it on the ground, why it would be meaningless to them, but why he knows it's important. And now he has to think to himself. Oh no, he thinks to himself, what should I do? Is the paper gone? He's up like 10, 15 flights of stairs. He's high up. He decides to go out, and that's our conflict, right? He goes out onto the ledge. He makes his way along the ledge, scooting. He gets the paper, but then he makes a mistake. He looks down, and this has an effect on him. Make sure you know what this effect is. When he looks down and sees the street, it changes for him. The amount of time it takes him, at least mentally, and that's important when I talk about time, it takes him to go from the window to his paper seems much quicker than the way back. He ends up shooting up, scraping his legs. He has the piece of paper in his mouth. His buttons are, like, he almost falls off. Like, this is scary stuff. He could die. Contents of a Dead Man's Pocket, right? We're starting to get towards that. He somehow gets the courage mentally to start making his way. But as he's walking, he's getting more and more terrified. And as he gets to his window, he slams into it. And then, big surprise, the window shuts on him, which was foreshadowed at the beginning. Remember how hard that window was to open. So now he's stuck outside in an external conflict, right? He can't get in. He's already terrified. And he does all these things to try to get back inside. Finally, he breaks the window, which he attempted the first time, but it didn't work for him. Once he gets inside, he puts a piece of paper back on the desk. He puts some pencils on top of it, I think, and he decides to go to the movies. He decides what's more important is spending time with his wife. Make sure you understand about time. He realizes he hasn't been outside that long, and that's part of how he gets upset because he knows he'll have to wait 4 hours because his wife's had a double feature. Like, she's probably just got there. And then make sure you know the ending. What happens? What happens when he closes that door? Why is he smiling to himself? So those are all important things to know from Contents of a Dead Man's Pocket. Now, I did 2 things for you that are part of the literary terms. Just a minute. Julie. I told you the plot, right? Plot is a literary term. It just means a sequence of events. I have a funny story. My husband went canoeing with his work friends, and he was telling me how it would have been boring because people, not boring, but less adventurous, because people were just rowing, but someone had brought squirt guns, and no one wanted to use the squirt guns. But Bruce, Mr. Jameson, he filled up that squirt gun and he started shooting everyone. He added conflict. He added plot.
Right in the face.
Apparently right in the face. But so that's what plot is, the secret of events. People who were on that trip would be able to tell you what happened before the squirt guns and what happened after, because that's memorable. Okay? So plot is those memorable sequence of events. The other thing I did was I told you the story in chronological order, because that's the order our story is. We don't have flashbacks. We don't have flash forwards. It's told in the order that things happen. I think that's good. Make sure you're studying your vocabulary. If you have any other questions, don't hesitate to ask Miss Corso. You can always email me. I'm available. Now I'm going to move on to my juniors. So ta-ta, 10th graders. I'll see you later. We have American literature. I love American literature. I start out purposely with what is an American by, I'm going to try my French, de Québécois. It's an excerpt from his essay. It defines what the American dream is that early on. We're talking about a piece of literature that's from that early part of our history, right? And he makes all these comparisons about how in Europe they're like plants who have no good soil, who aren't taken care of. Like he just wants to give up on Europe. But America has opportunity that you can be transplanted. And he makes this very entrenched definition that we, I would argue, still believe in. That there are opportunities that are available to anyone who works hard and you will be successful. And that's part of the American dream. Now, part of what happens this year in your literature is it's criticized. Is that true? Is everyone afforded the American dream? Is it true that hard work equals success no matter what? So that'll be what's interesting throughout the year. So I think I meant make sure you pay attention to the contrast, how he contrasts what it's like in Europe compared to America. What do Americans have? Okay? Then you read 2 letters. I love these letters. Not only did they teach me more about the history of my country, but it's like a glimpse into some private life too. And that's what's important about these, is the private aspect and the public. So let's start with Phyllis Wheatley. She writes to the Reverend Samson Occam. He has just written a response in the newspaper about ministers not only owning slaves. Equality came in small increments. So for a minister to make that kind of declaration was a big deal. This is important to Phyllis Wheatley because she is a former slave. She has a personal interest vested in this letter. So she wants to write to him and thank him personally. But the public issue is that he's coming out against ministers owning slaves, okay? Now, Phyllis, her writing is fantastic. She uses scripture. She mentions the Egyptians being enslaved from the Bible. Why? Why would she do that? Because she knows who her audience is. Reverend Samson Occam. Not only is that going to make her look good, he's going to know what she's talking about. There's also figurative language. She talks about the Christians bringing light to Africa. Missionary work is what she's talking about. Are they actually bringing lanterns? No, she's talking figuratively. She's referring to the Bible and religion as being a enlightenment of the mind. That's what she's referring to as a light. It's a wonderful piece. I love it. I love it. Okay, so Abigail Adams is writing to her husband, John Adams. He's working on the Declaration of Independence. British rule is still what's going on, but there's the American Revolution around the corner. July 4th, 1776 is coming. But she lives in a town where people are worried. I mean, think about it. You're about to get rid of your government. In most countries, the penalty for that is death, so they're worried. So here she uses some figurative language. She said, it's like the house is on fire and people are arguing about the cost of water. There's no house really on fire. She's talking about the government. She's talking about people being worried about what to do. They're talking about being worried that there's enough men. That's what the water is, what the cost. Will we have enough people to fight this? This piece is awesome because she mentions women rights. She says, "I cannot say that I think you are very generous to the ladies. For whilst you are proclaiming peace and goodwill to men, emancipating all nations, you insist upon retaining an absolute power over wives." A little insert of, "Hey, that's not fair." And then she does this thing for the personal aspect where she wants her husband home. She wants the father of her children to help raise her children, but she lets him know, don't worry about them, they're being taken care of, but we miss you. It's an awesome piece. For those of you who are paying attention, I will offer extra credit to anyone who can tell me the mistake I made. I will just tell you that I said something that's a little backwards, still related, but a little backwards, about the letter to the Reverend Samson Occam. So if you can figure out what that is, email it to me and I'll get you some extra credit, okay? Have a nice night. Goodbye.
I was trying to be quick. I need to tighten it up. Goodbye.
I'm going to read Kermit the Hermit by Bill. Junie, it's really good. It's really good. In Monterey Bay, there's a jumble of rock, stacked up like a castle across from the dock. The king of this castle, an old crab called Kermit, lived all by himself in a cave like a hermit. There was never a crab who was one half as selfish, or 1/10 as mean as this crusty old shellfish. What made Kermit greedy and grumpy that way was the shortage of food everywhere in the bay. For a crab must depend on what he can find, small scraps and tidbits of any old kind. To Kermit each day meant a fight for survival, with every last seagull and crab as a rival. Look at, they're trying to steal his food. That's not okay. Unless it is cured, sometimes greediness grows. Where it finally stops, alas, nobody knows. And before very long, Kermit grabbed everything, from a rusty padlock to a ball of kite string, a broken jackknife, a pair of old shoes, things that a crab probably couldn't possibly use. He's so stuffed in there. And his cave was soon crammed without 1 inch to spare. There was just enough space left for Kermit in there. Like any old miser, he wanted a lot of something or other, he didn't care what. If he'd been greedy the rest of his days, if an odd twist of fate hadn't changed Kermit's ways. Look at all that stuff he took, huh? This remarkable change in old Kermit began with an everyday thing, just a battered tin can. A pork and bean can that had been tossed away far out in the sand dunes that bordered the bay. The crumpled tin lid caught the sun's bright reflection, which caused it to sparkle in every direction.
Return next week to hear the rest of the story and discover what other interesting things Bruce will do during the reading of the story.